Now we're going to have an interesting discussion. I've not looked at any of these questions that have been flashing up behind me, but I assume that there are some excellent ones. Have we got any of them flashing yet? Oh, wow. Oh, good. So somebody's going to choose what I need to answer? John, how are we going to run this?
What we're going to do is actually just entertain your questions with Bill. And I think one question last night, Bill, was, and did you ever disagree with Peter Drucker?
Did I ever disagree with Peter Drucker? Rarely, but I did explain last night a situation where we disagreed. Peter and I were holding a management seminar in Japan, in Tokyo, and we had a thriving business in Tokyo with a partner who had their headquarters down in Osaka. And I thought this would be a great opportunity for them to bring their people there and also to invite our customers there. Drucker is a well-known name in Japan as well as in the States, and we had a lot of people coming, so I thought it would be a great way to sell, frankly. And I had made a decision about a month before that not to bring one of our new innovative businesses to Japan yet, and I knew our Japanese partner was a little upset about that, but I felt, they would still have an opportunity to sell and they would come. Well, we opened up the seminar and I looked around and there wasn't anyone from our Japanese partner. I didn't see any of our customers that I knew. And all day long, as I was trying to conduct myself during the seminar, internally I was steaming that they didn't take advantage of this. So that evening, Peter and I had dinner together as the seminar was over, and I told Peter about the story, about why I was mad. And I said, Peter, I'm going to show those guys down in Osaka. I said I was going to go down tomorrow on the train, but I'm going to change my flight. I'm going home tomorrow. And he said, oh, Bill, you shouldn't do that. He said, you should go down there. You should talk to them. That's what you should do. And I listened very politely, but I had decided what I was going to do. He knew that, and we finished our dinner and went to our respective rooms. About 10 o'clock that night, I got a call from Peter Drucker. He said, Bill, I want you to come up to my room. So I had my pajamas on. I had to redress again. I went up to Peter's room, and as he opened the door, he had moved the chair over there next to the bed. He said, you sit in that chair, and I'm going to sit in the bed. And he said, Bill, he said, you've allowed hubris to take over. It's not about you. It's about the people in Service Master. That's your leadership responsibility. It's not about how you feel about this. What you need to do for the people at Service Master is you need to get on a train tomorrow and go down and resolve this thing in Osaka. That's what's for them. And it's about time you start recognizing that that's your responsibility as a leader. Yes, Peter.
Let's take number 4. Should Christians be concerned with the imbalance of wealth?
Well, I think the concern probably is not so much with the imbalance, if you accept my premise. God owns everything. So whatever imbalance there is temporary. I feel sorry for the person who is trusting in the great wealth they have as part of an ultimate answer to the meaning of life. That's my response to the imbalance. Now, the reality is that the free market system doesn't do an efficient job in the distribution of wealth. That's a reality. We have poverty because of that fact. We have also poverty because of people's choices. So it's a mix. But as you talk about the whole issue of responding to poverty, especially in the underdeveloped areas of the world, it's both an issue of the creation of wealth and it's an issue with respect to the more effective distribution of wealth. I will give you an experience, and when I finish, you'll think I'm a ultimate socialist. I'm really not. But as a young lawyer, I had an opportunity to testify before the House Ways and Means Committee on tax policy. And I had thought a lot about this whole distribution question and had concluded that we could solve the problem here in America by just simply having a 100% estate tax, so that every generation would have to earn it on their own. And I made that proposal. Now there would be some caveats to that. If you died with a surviving spouse and minor children, there would be a provision for the support, the decent support of the surviving spouse and minor children. There also would be something else. There would be a 100% credit for the gift of your resources to organizations, we call them not-for-profits, educational organizations that are doing something significant in society. But it would absolutely eliminate people doing nothing and living on inherited wealth.
One more question.
But I didn't receive a very favorable reaction. And the Democrats were in control. They didn't know what to do with my recommendation.
One more from the board, and then number 9, Bill, I think, what is distinctive about a business person who follows Christ as opposed to an ethical business person?
Well, you know, I have a hard time putting those in juxtaposition to each other. But let me just say that I think inherent in the fact that all of us have been created in the image and likeness of God is that quiet voice that's there with respect to issues of right and wrong. We can develop a process of suppressing it. We can develop a process of ignoring it. But I think it's there in every human being. And it's all part of the God-like nature that every human being has. So I say that as telling you that some of the most ethical folks that I worked with in business had no clear profession of Christian faith, but were certainly doing an ethical job. The one question that I always asked of executives that we were seeking to hire from outside is, how do you determine whether something is right or wrong? And a person, if you press them on that, they really can't get an answer to that without identifying, do they have a source for their ethic? And some people, you know, the source is the law, or the source is the way I was taught by my parents, or something like that. It's as vague as that. And but that is not the ultimate source. And I don't want to belabor the point, but I will tell you, I grew up in a Christian home, and I'm thankful for it. There's a lot of things I learned. There was one thing, however, that didn't guide me in an ethical principle. And I had to learn it in the marketplace. And that was, I grew up with the understanding that there was just only certain jobs that women could do. You know, I mean, they could teach, they could work as nurses, but the last thing they could ever do is be a CEO. And they certainly couldn't do certain other functions. And I grew up in a situation where there were certain functions they obviously couldn't do in the church as well. And I'm not going to get into a theological debate with you, but I had a certain view of what women could do and not do. It wasn't until a time that I reported to a woman in the workplace that I found that here was somebody smarter than I was, could do the job better than I could do, and I was totally wrong. I was ethically wrong in what I had grown up with in my home. So I think we have to be very careful about trying to understand what is right and what is wrong. And the question I often ask myself today, I was so wrong on that question. What other questions are that I feel so strongly about what's right, but maybe I'm really wrong? I think we're always learning. That's the point.
Okay, other questions from the floor? You just stand up and let me speak out so we can hear it. And if you have a question for Bill, Mr. Pollard? You can't think of one, you look up here. Okay.
All right, let me keep this way. So, Bill, what would you say is God's model for trying to determine what executive compensation should be?
Well, we had a couple of principles in Service Master. We paid based upon performance, and we promoted based upon potential. And by the way, we didn't look at a person's faith as part of those two decisions. We also had another premise, and that was that the CEO's base compensation should not be higher than 10 times entry-level position in the company. And our entry-level positions were janitor-level positions. The incentive factor could be greater than that. And the more responsibility you had in the company, the more of your compensation you had at risk. So I had a significant amount of my compensation at risk. 80% of my compensation, total compensation, potential total compensation at risk. And it was based upon performance standards of the company. So those are some principles we used in Service Master. But I don't know if you're probing for something more.
No, that was great.
Yeah.
How about question 5 up there?
How do you allow your employees to fail well?
Boy, that's a tough one. If you really step back and try to understand why people fail, they fail because they haven't been trained for the job. They fail because they haven't been given the tools to do the job. They may fail because, as Drucker would say, they've been given a widowmaker's job. Nobody could do the job. The job hasn't been defined right. Or they fail because they wouldn't do the job. I've defined 4 real reasons why people fail. 3 of them are the responsibility of the manager, not the person. So understanding failure is a very important issue. One of the things we were never successful in implementing correctly in Service Master, and something that Walmart did that I really admired, is they had a program for failed store managers. The only way to get in the program was to fail as a store manager. And it lasted for 6 months, and it was taught by the executives of the company. And they had an 80% success rate. I think that's a model that ought to be considered, to be followed. As I said, I never got it fully implemented at Service Master.
Another question? No, back here. You establish a foundation of integrity early in life.
Well, I think that started in my experience in the home I was raised in the way my parents treated me with respect to issues of honesty and openness and issues about my faith. I think all of us go through the experiences of having compromises in life. Either compromising what we tell others or compromising what we should tell others. And I would have to say that I've had those compromises in life where I've made mistakes that would be said ethically wrong and judging about some of the things that maybe I should have disclosed that I didn't disclose, for example. But In my life, I've had a conscience, which I believe was the Holy Spirit, and bringing me to points of recognition. So it's not only establishing a foundation, but recognizing that you're an imperfect person, and you're going to have mistakes, and what to do when you have mistakes. If you can learn through those mistakes, including, as I said in my talk, having the wherewithal to confront them, and in some cases, to ask for forgiveness. That, for me, has been a learning process, one that started in my youth, as my father found me smoking as a teenager and went through that whole process of hiding that. I was hiding it, and he discovered it. And he didn't talk so much about smoking. He talked about the hiding factor and the meaning in my life. So that was my foundation. My early foundation was my home.
Back here.
What do you think is the purpose of a business?
That's a great question. Peter Drucker has about 3 or 4 questions he asks when he consults. What is your business? Who is your customer? What does your customer see as value? And he came to ServiceMaster during a critical time of our growth, and he asked our board that question. What is your business? Or what is your that's the same question. What is the purpose of your business? And our board responded, well, we're in the business of cleaning floors, we're in the business of cleaning hospitals, we're in the business of killing bugs, we're in the killing all the different things we did. And after listening to us for about 5 minutes, he said something to our board that I was never able to tell him. He said, you're all wrong. You're in simply the business of developing people, which was our second objective, by the way. We knew that. He said, you package it all different ways to serve the customers, but you can't run a business without people. You can't run an effective business without committed and trained people. Your business is the development of people. And I do think that is the ultimate purpose of business. Okay. Okay.
We live in a country of great prosperity and luxury, and there's people all over the world in extreme poverty. And how do we as business people, Christian business people, reconcile and strike some kind of a balance between what we're able to enjoy and what we could contribute? No matter how much we already contribute, we could always contribute more.
Well, I think our first responsibility is to invest what we have. I don't think our responsibility is to balance. I do think our responsibility as part of investing what we have is to get involved. And one of the things that I've discovered, and our family is significantly involved in Africa, for example, in areas of poverty and with the tool of microfinance. And what I found is that in the process of balancing, if it's a gift, it'll create dependency. If it's an opportunity for the person to earn, they will have dignity and worth, which is far more important than the money in their pocket. In fact, one of the most interesting things I found in Africa is most of the people that I met and spent time with, that I would look at and say, boy, this is awful, these people are really poor. They do not think they're poor if they're in the process of earning their living. One of the greatest experiences I had was in a small little town in northern Uganda. And we came to visit a group of people who had borrowed. And these were a group of, I think there was 5 women in this little town. They each borrowed $150 to grow their little trading businesses. You know why they borrowed the money? They borrowed the money so that they could grow their businesses. You know why they wanted to grow their businesses? Each one of these women had already taken in 3 orphans in the town, orphans because of AIDS. There were still more orphans to take into their homes. The only way they could afford to do it is to grow their businesses. And they needed some capital to do it. By the way, they didn't spend 6 months forming a 501c3 organization. They saw a need, and they realized they needed profit to respond to that need. And they needed capital they didn't have, but a resource which would allow them to pay back the capital. And I can't tell you how bare necessities they were living in. And when I said their home, none of us would feel comfortable spending one night in that home. It was a hut. You know, I'll go on, could go on in details. But they were not poor. They had pride in what they were doing and took advantage of a situation and an opportunity to care for others. But they're listed in the calculations of poverty, by the way.
Okay, one more question.
John? So you just jumped into the field of nonprofit a little bit in terms of that, and you serve obviously on a variety of nonprofit boards. With the move or the momentum around social entrepreneurism and the desire for nonprofits to start businesses, have you seen any good models of nonprofits that actually can work in profit ventures or start businesses, or should the two just stay apart and kind of let the nonprofits be service-oriented and businesses do profit?
Well, let me just say that business is business, and it has to be run as a business. So there's also a move out there, business is a mission. Some of you folks may have heard of the description of certain businesses as kingdom businesses, which is fine. It's trying to introduce Christian principles, some of what I've even talked about today. But the business itself is a vehicle. It's not an institution. And it has to operate like a business to be effective. And one of the worst things that could happen is to get into business and fail and try to have a testimony as a Christian. And you've got competition. It's a rough and woolly world wherever you are when you're in business. So it's important to recognize that. And there are some examples of not-for-profits that have moved into the for-profit area. And certainly the organization that we work with in microfinance is a not-for-profit organization, but they have loans all over the world. That's Opportunity International. And they're doing a fantastic job. But they're funding businesses.
Bill has a whole day here at Seattle Pacific University, a day of learning, and he's going to be answering questions and talking all day. And John will probably share a little bit more about that. But thank you, Bill, for doing this, and thank you.